Hello, YouTube. How's it going?
Hi,
Today,
doing.
I'm really blessed to have the gorgeous Charly Wenzel with me today. Charly is a well-renowned dancer, artist, actor. So tell me about the trip from Germany, like coming to New York to I guess, what made you do that?
Sure. So I came to New York 17 years ago, which blows my mind just saying that. And I was supposed to stay for a year.
Okay.
And now it's 17 years later. But so originally I came over to study at the Ailey School to do an extra year of dance training in New York to then go back to Germany to pursue my dance career in Europe. But I got stuck.
What do you mean by got stuck? Did you like fall in love with the New York theater, or how did that work?
Everything. I mean, I love New York. Like ever since I visited for the first time, which was a year before I moved here,
Huh?
I just felt at home.
Okay.
And after a year of studying here and like building a network, getting to know people, other artists, collaborating with people, I just felt like I didn't want to leave.
So what got you into dance? Like what was like, click, I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life.
So the reason why I started in the first place is a very silly reason. It's because all of my friends took ballet class when I was little, and I was 6 years old, and that's why I said to my parents, I want to take ballet too. So that was like a stupid reason to start, but
I
once I
mean,
started, I just got hooked from
I
there.
don't think your friends are still doing ballet, but you're
No,
definitely
nobody. They got me into it, but yes.
wow. No, no, like I've had acting classes with you, and that's also something that you're pursuing. What's the similarity between acting and dancing, and why did you make that like, you know what? I'm also going to learn how to learn acting or expand your education.
For me, I've always done acting back in the day, even in Germany in high school. And it was a point where I had to make that decision. Okay, am I going to focus on acting or dancing? And at that time, I chose dance. But it was always something that I've done a little bit, on the side throughout the years. And I've always liked dance theater, which kind of combines both.
Okay.
Like, even in my own work, I always like to use spoken word and just to have that theatrical element too. So it's like a natural transition for me.
Your resume, when I was like looking through it, like especially with dance, film, video choreography, it's quite extensive. Like the first one was Bavarian State Opera,
Mhm.
2001 till now. And I'm like, wow. So for the people that like, I'm not athletic. I can't, if you tell me to get on my tippy toes, that's not happening. Is that so? When you're learning ballet, what's the difference between someone that you can tell physically condition themselves to be a dancer versus someone that just dances for fun? Like, what's the distinction between the two? Because I would imagine it's like being a football player, you have to keep training. It's conditioning.
Mm. I mean, it's never wrong to start early on, right? To start when you're young to like condition your body. But then it's also there's so many different types of dance, right? So are we talking about becoming a classical ballet dancer? In that case, you really have to start young, train like a very specific muscles and just mold your body into that very specific aesthetic of classical dance. But if you talk contemporary dance, that's different, right? Like you can start maybe a little bit later, or there's just so many different types of dance. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. But I would encourage anybody to just go for it, no matter how old you are. And it's
What got you into, so what's the difference between like dancer, principal dancer? Like what's the difference? Like when you have that designation?
you know again, it depends on like what genre we're talking about.
Okay.
In classical ballet, there
Okay.
is a very specific structure, to how those companies are structured, from like the principal ballerina, right? That like that's the top of the food chain, or if you just look in the chorus, or like there are different um, positions to that.
Okay.
But I think if you're talking like contemporary postmodern dance, again, musical theater is another one. They're different structures. And so, yeah, it kind of depends on
How,
what you're looking at.
how many times have you been injured while you're dancing? Like, have you ever sustained any injury that are like, wow, this hurts?
Oh, yeah. Like, so the major worst one was probably in my last year of my dance program in Germany,
Mhm.
when I broke my leg. I just like did a turn and I just turned off my lower leg. Basically, both bones were just like
Oh.
broken. Nobody really knows how it happened. And even the doctors were like, how the hell did you do that? And I said my bones were strong, but that means that I wasn't able to do like the final performance that we had. And I had planned to move to New York like half a year later.
Wow.
So when I came to New York, that was the first time I actually started jumping again on that
Wow.
leg. And I had like a whole metal rod inside the bone that they had to take out before I moved here, which
Wow.
was earlier than it was supposed to be, but it seemed to be fine. And I was fine. And along the way, there have been injuries, like back injuries, all kinds of things. That's just
Wow.
part of the path.
How important it is, like when you're training and like, what's the difference between like, oh, I'm dancing, and how would you define training as a dancer?
Yeah, so I wish there was more of an emphasis in a lot of dance programs on conditioning,
Okay.
and
What is that?
more on like doing like Pilates and yoga. That those were things that I discovered a little bit later, especially because of my injuries, right? Like my back injuries. I was like for the first time aware that I need to train my core more. But when you're young
Right.
and your body
Right.
can do whatever crazy things, you're not thinking about it, but that's not necessarily sustainable. So
Okay.
I think it's really important for young dancers to be aware that
So
there's gonna be a lot of wear and tear.
that's a scammer.
Don't answer that. So yeah, conditioning is super important, and especially as you get older as a dancer, that's like most of the training that I do is conditioning, just to sustain and make sure. Yeah.
How, like, when you did a lot of it, how did because when you dance, you do choreography and things have to be exact to what the vision is, how important is it to have a sense of coordination? Like, obviously, hand-eye coordination, coordinating with songs, coordinating with timing. I'm using really loose terms.
That's fine. I mean, that stuff is all fundamental, and that's all practice, right? So
Okay.
that's why I'm saying, like, the earlier you start, the easier it's going to be. It's like learning a language. When you start learning a language later on in your life, it's going to be a little bit harder to pick up than when you're a child. You just learn faster. Same thing with the body, all of the coordination, being able to also retain, memorize choreography. It's a muscle you train, and it's easier to start that early on.
How supportive of were your parents when they were like, when did your parents know it's like, oh, she's gonna be a dancer? Like, when did it click in their mind?
Well, pretty much after I graduated from high school.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of unusual in Germany because we don't have dance programs like they have in the US as part of like a university, like college programs. In Germany, there are a lot fewer,
Okay.
and a lot of them are focused on classical ballet, which was not the direction I wanted to go into. So my only possibility was to go to like a private dance school. So after I graduated from high school, I said to my parents, I'm gonna do this 3-year dance program at this private school. But they were extremely supportive, especially given the fact that my father was a teacher, like really into academics. They were very supportive, and they knew kind of that they couldn't change my mind anyway. So
Oh,
there was
got the
that.
stubbornness. Is it were your parents like, did they instill a sense of like punctuality and like never be late to anything, or like?
Um, I don't know if my parents instilled that in me. I mean, it is kind of like a German thing. I mean, I have friends, of course, in Germany who are not punctual, but I think Germans in general tend to be pretty efficient. And, like when it comes to that, for me, it's a matter of respect, right? Like you get somewhere in time to show respect for the person you're meeting.
Like, have you ever, when you were a choreographer or a producer, were you ever like, did someone ever show up late and you're like, why?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, it's interesting because there are always people who just cannot be on time no matter what. And it's like, it's amazing to me. It's like, if I can do it, why can't you do it? And it's a problem as a choreographer because you actually spend a lot of money creating your work because you have to pay for rehearsal space. So
Oh, wow.
whenever a dancer is late, I'm wasting money, you know, because I
Wow.
cannot start rehearsal. So I kind of made it clear very early on, everybody has to be there 15 minutes before rehearsal starts, you know, or like give them a call time that's 15 minutes earlier just to make sure that we can actually start on time. So those things are important.
How important is it? Well, what's the difference between like dancing like on the street versus a rehearsal space, for example? Like how important is it to have a specific space for rehearsal or what you want to do, or like having all the mirrors in front of you? Like I'm thinking like wall of mirrors.
Yeah, I mean, it also depends again what kind of dance you do. But for me, like the kind of movement that I choreograph, it's pretty athletic. You know, there's a lot of floor work. There is jumping. So you need a specific floor in order for the dancers not to break anything or get injured, right? So you need a dance floor. You need a sound system to play music. You want like an enclosed space to be able to focus on the work and not to be distracted. And there's just so many factors, right? So
When did it shift from dancing between being something that you paid for and studied till you're like, I'm a professional, I'm getting paid for this? Like how did that shift occur?
I mean, it was during my dance program, right, the professional dance program in Germany. In my second year, that's where I started working professional at the Bavarian State Opera, and that's where I started getting paid to be a dancer for the first time. So it was during my education.
Okay. So when you like when people study ballerina, is it like specific shoes that they have to wear, or like when I was like watching John Wick 3, really bad like way to get a history of dancing. There was a scene where they're doing dance and it's like there are Russian ballerinas, and it cuts to a part where the lady pulls off one of her toenails because it's actually really intense.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize, or I definitely didn't realize the amount of work and dedication that went into it.
But
Like,
it's painful, you know, it's painful, especially those, like you're talking about point shoes, right? Like the ballerinas that
right,
dance on the tip of the,
right.
it's a point, very painful process. And there's like blood and there's blisters and there's like toenails coming off. And that's just part of the world and the dedication and the sacrifices you make in order to do what you love, you know?
Wow. No, so how did it get in? So when you when you you're trying to shift yourself from dancing to acting, or you feel like those are complementary, or what are your goals?
So I'm I'm trying to still do both in terms of also being like a choreographer, a dance filmmaker. But when it comes to the performing aspect, which I love, like that's something I've loved since I was a little girl, and I don't want to lose that. And I've always loved acting. So I would love to transition from being a dancer on stage to transition into acting. But I'm figuring it out, like it's kind of new, and I know everything about the dance industry, and there's a lot to learn about acting, and it's a process, right? So like right now I'm just focused on training for the most part, and because I know it takes a lot of work and dedication to get to a certain level.
I mean, like how has dancing taught you that it takes time to do something? Like a lot of people they think about overnight success.
Mm.
Like snap your fingers, next day I'm Will Smith, next day
Right.
I'm a famous X, Y, and Z. They think about the millionaire overnight or something
Yeah.
in those terms. How has being a dancer completely proven that wrong for you? Or like
Mm.
that couldn't be further from the truth?
it's just the amount of work, you know, like just imagine like starting at 6 years old and then dancing every day, all day for 3 years, doing the same exercise, especially in classical ballet. You do the same move like a million times and you're like getting a little bit closer to getting it perfect, right? So you can never achieve perfection, but you're like, you know, working and striving towards perfection, but it just takes a lot of patience, a lot of work, a lot of dedication. And at the same time, you can't forget why you're doing it, right? So I think that's really important too. You're there because you love what you do. And I think for me, it's like really much being in the moment. You know, every dance class, I'm not thinking about what I'm going to achieve tomorrow or next year. I'm like in the moment, and it's almost like a kind of a meditation. And if you're true in the moment all the time, I think you're going to see the fruits of your labor, so to speak, you know, eventually.
So when you're doing that, how do you, a lot of people, they do it, they don't see results right away, but they get really discouraged. They're like, what am I doing? I've been doing this 50 million times, you know, over exaggerating, or they're thinking like, I'm not seeing results, like maybe I'm not cut out for this. How is it, like what did you do to pass that, or like to maintain, to be persistent, to have consistency, to be like, you know, I'm not fazed by this.
Right. It's a good question because there is a lot of rejection, right? In dance, as much as in acting too, you go to so many auditions. And sometimes in dance, especially, you have like 50 people in the room auditioning for a part, and then maybe like they're taking one or two people, or maybe they don't take anybody.
Wow.
So you get a really thick skin, like you cannot take any of that personal because it's 50 people in the room. But what's going to differentiate you from the rest of the people is like, are you going to keep going? And if you look at the really successful people, those examples where we're like, oh, how come they did it so easily? We don't see that they were the ones who didn't give up and kept going, right? So
Right.
you have that choice, right? Are you going to give up, or are you going to keep going and just continue to have faith to get there eventually? And if you really truly love what you do, I feel like you're not going to give up so easily.
Do you feel like when you do it, even if you don't achieve the success, you don't get the part, quote unquote, that you're satisfied because at the end of the day, you're a dancer, you're a performer, you are who you love, and you are doing what you love to do, and that allows you to have a sense of satisfaction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also you can reframe like, okay, an audition is a free class. I'm going to do my best and maybe I'm going to get a job out of it, but it's a free class. It's a chance for me to practice my craft, right? Same thing with auditions for actors. You get a chance to put yourself out there and practice your craft. And maybe, you know, you get something out of it. Maybe you don't, but it's going to get you a step further to where you want to be. And I really believe in energy. The more you put into something, the more you're going to get out of it, right? It's like this circle of energy. Energy is never lost.
Oh, wow. That is very true, because it's like silver lining. Yeah, I didn't get it, but at least I have the experience of auditioning.
Yeah,
So
and you don't know who you're going to meet, you know, like they might remember you later for something else, but you know, it's really about having a positive outlook, and it's hard to teach that, but
no, I can imagine. Like, so when you're there, like for example, common person is not going to be a superstar dancer, a superstar performer. Like average person is just not that. If you want to look at it at that metric, but when you start to hit those levels where you're becoming more and more, you're a professional and you're like really good, but then you're in a room where it's like 50 other people are also really good. How,
right.
like, how does your, do you look at them and go, man, they didn't deserve to be here? Or do you look at it and go, wow, I also trained really hard, they must have also trained very hard, and you respect them as peers? Or how, what's your mindset when you see other people that are also uh,
Yeah.
dancers?
I mean, absolutely. I think there's also, again, a difference between like the classical ballet world. I think there's a lot more competition, you know, because it's like such a hierarchy in terms of like the roles, and it's very competitive. In my experience, contemporary dance is more like a community where you support each other and we all know how much it takes. And I was on the other side of it where I was running auditions for a company I worked with. So we had like 100 people
Wow.
auditioning, you know, for maybe to fill three slots, and I see a room full of amazing dancers.
Wow.
Everybody's unique, and then we have to make a decision based on what we're looking for, very specifically
Wow.
for the company, for a specific part, height. Like there are so many different factors involved. So knowing that from the other side of the room, it gives you perspective, right? It's not about you personally. Like everybody is amazing and talented and gifted and unique, but usually people just look for a very specific thing.
That's actually really interesting because, like, if you have an acting audition and you have like 200,000 auditions for a role using hypothetical numbers, what would you say is like the real amount of people that you're competing with that are skilled, and how, and that's still a large number, I would imagine, right? Like you were mentioning, like you have a dance company and you're like, okay, we have 50 auditions today, 100 auditions, 1,000 auditions. Those are all qualified people,
Mm-hmm.
give or take, right? Like it's not like a random person's like, oh, look at this audition, I'm just gonna go in and I had no training and I never did anything in this. I would imagine it's like the Olympics almost. Like
Yeah.
everyone there, there's a lot of competition, like swimmers all over the world, but it's it's like the most qualified people competing against each other. How do you deal with that pressure? Like, or is it pressure to you, or is it like
No,
whatever?
it's not. Like I there's like a quote, there's no competition in the divine mind. And I like to not even focus on the competition. I'm focusing on myself. Like if you just think about how many people are competing for this one job, like it's already too late. You've already lost, like you have to focus on what you can bring to the table and just be in the moment and do your best and bring in your own instead of focusing on competition. I feel like that's the wrong place to put your focus on.
So that's very like I guess you only really compete with yourself, like better than yourself of yesterday,
Yeah,
or
yeah, I mean, seriously, because it's about growth, right? You continually want to grow. If you're like Brad Pitt or like whatever, like
right.
any, I think the right mindset is to continue trying to grow and to get better no matter what point you're at, and don't think about like competition or status, but just like work on yourself and get better and, bring
Do,
everything you have
do
to
you
it.
feel like your experience in dance has taught you that it's more of a meritocracy? It's more like you put in the work. Like you can't just give someone $1 million and then make them like a great dancer overnight. Like I would imagine that money, for example, like if you want someone to build a real estate company, you could give them a couple $1 million, they'll buy a few houses, and oh, I guess I own real estate and I guess I'm a landlord now.
Mm,
Like there's a cheat code to that, which is money. But
right.
in dancing, I would imagine that your own individual discipline, your own individual hard work is the metric of how well you do in that field.
Exactly. It's resilience, it's focus and resilience, a positive outlook. If it's, dance or acting, you focus on what you're trying to do. You find the kind of work that you would like to go and you go specifically for those kind of jobs. Um, that's the only way that's sustainable. I think you have to have a strong foundation to build something, right? If it's just like something shaky, somebody throwing money at you, it's not going to last.
Right. So what has been your foundation?
In what sense?
Like your foundation of these are my go-tos. Like I'm looking in your acting resume. You've done a lot of different commercials. You've done a lot of different films, supporting principal. You've done Cover Girl, Woman on the Street. You've done Casino Visitor. Like when you when you go into these acting auditions, what has been the difference between going into an acting audition versus a dance audition?
The very huge difference is that you are usually the only person in the room and the focus is on you as an individual. In dance, as I said, a lot of those auditions, you have 50 people in the room at the same time and you're still
Wow.
trying to be seen through like rows and rows of dancers, right? Like how are you going to stand out? And in acting, it's kind of like, it's nice because people are actually looking at you in an audition as a dancer. You don't even know if anybody's going to see you. And I'm not tall, I'm short. So chances are they're not going to see me behind the tall dancer in front of me. So, and you're still doing your best. And in acting, it's just you. And it's, of course, a lot of pressure that way too.
Right.
But it's nice that you know that you're actually being seen.
Wow. No, that's definitely very. So, which choreographs did you win awards for actually? Because it says award-winning choreographer.
So that was for the dance films that I made. Like I made four dance films that have been presented at film festivals all
Okay.
over the place, and I've won awards for actually every single one of them. Like the latest one that I did won 3 awards so far, but we're still in the middle of the festival run.
So
So
I actually like that's what stood out because when I think award winner, I think like a person that's holding an award and going like, haha, I'm better than you now. Don't associate with me like and you're very down to earth. Like you like ever since I met you in the first class, like friendly, down to earth, approachable. How did you, or is it just something that's normally naturally you? How do you maintain that down to earthness? Like not having an ego in your mind, like, haha, I'm better than you.
thank you, first of all, but I'm also, I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know. I just know we're like all in the same place in a way. We're all trying our best. We're all trying to just like do something, and I feel like in the artist community there is this sense of community. Like we're trying to create something that is hopefully going to transform or inspire our audiences, and it's not about me, it's a greater purpose that we all have, right? So I guess I don't know if that's a good answer.
No, it's definitely great because the reason I'm thinking is because sometimes you read in the tabloids like people that are like snobby when they're in auditions or snobby around people because they feel like they made it to a certain point, like where they win a bunch of awards and they're like, oh, all of a sudden they have a sense of pretentiousness to them, and this is like tabloids, opinion papers, and it's so different, I guess, for me reading that versus going into an actual acting class and interacting with a bunch of people and realizing like everyone's really down to earth, like it seems like
Right.
like people have a sense of like community, of there's no hierarchy. And I noticed that like you've done a lot of roles, like you've been a fitness instructor, you've been a Pilates instructor, yoga instructor. How did how did you get that love or feel for being a teacher or like being someone that is
Mm.
sharing that knowledge, like not just as a performer but also someone that also teaches?
I think, I mean, I've taught a lot of dance also, like teaching kids and adults and like all different age groups. And I think that's like one of the really rewarding things to do, with our knowledge, to pass it on like to the next generation, or if it's like teaching fitness to adults and just seeing how people get confidence like through fitness or through dance. Like people get confident, they feel better, they're healthier. And if I can contribute to that, then that's amazing. And that's really rewarding to see. And I really enjoy the process of teaching. And it's like learning from my students too. If they're like even children, there's always something that you can learn in the process. So that's something that I really enjoy.
What's the most interesting thing you learned from a child?
I think I can think back of like I was teaching at a summer dance camp. Was that last year? I think it was last year. And just how fearless these kids were. We did like a choreography, and I threw like an idea, and how creative and fearless those
Wow.
kids were to just like try ideas. And they would come in the next day with like, oh, I have an idea, maybe we can do this and this, and just see the creativity and the confidence in these children. That really taught me maybe not to be so self-critical all the time, because that's something that we all have to, like, that self-doubt, and it's like, oh, am I good enough? And then you see these children and they're like, yes, let's do this. Oh, and then in the beginning, I'm gonna jump from behind the pole. Like, they have so many ideas, and it was really
Wow.
inspiring to see that.
Do you ever feel like as you grow older, you become more self-critical, and then like seeing that kid be like, I have all this confidence is just inspiring. It's like, maybe it's not so
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, there's just like this abundance and freedom that kids have, and the fearlessness, and you can only hope that they're gonna, keep that and not get too worn down by society telling them, oh, you got to be better, or you have to join the rat race or whatever, like all this stupid stuff that really doesn't matter.
Wow. No, that's definitely good. And I really like feel like so thankful to be able to like hear that. Like even from my perspective, it's like, don't take it so seriously. Don't.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Like, we take ourselves way too serious. Like, even as artists, like, wait a second, we got this privilege to work on this amazing craft, and then we take it so seriously. We're like, oh my God, I'm not good enough. Like, we're playing, right? We're trying to play for a living. Like, how serious can that be? You've got to be disciplined and focused, but it's not like you're not trying to cure coronavirus or something like that.
Yeah. So how has like, you ever feel self-conscious when you're dancing, like performing or auditioning or like in front of a bunch of dancers? How do you I guess get out of that, because you have to perform, right? Like that's the industry.
I mean, I think there's always a level of like self-doubt and being self-conscious and being nervous, but I think it's about how you channel that into your performance.
Okay.
You can let that wear you down and shut your body down, or you can use it as fuel, right, to like propel you. So I think it's about how to channel that energy, and what to do with it, and also maybe to take a step back sometimes, and not to be too hard on yourself, which is easier said than done. But if you go into like an audition or a casting with a certain sense of play and excitement, like if you can channel the nervousness into excitement to like go out there and like experiment and do something, I think that helps a lot.
Wow. No, that's definitely really useful. And, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's been so like everyone's been busy. Everyone's like all over the place. And I definitely want to thank you for taking your time to come up on my show. And the next time, like you're at a performance, I'm going to feel terrible if I don't get tickets. I'll pay for them, but give me like a 90% discount.
Yeah, thank you so
Cheap
much.
YouTube. I'm cheap. But I will support. And definitely, I look forward to having this talk with you again and again. To the audience, Charly Wenzel, good friend of mine, dancer, choreographer, filmmaker. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It was fun.